Welcome to Transformation with Martine. Conquer everything and compromise nothing. This show brings you real, raw, and vulnerable conversations. If you have never liked small talk and have been on a personal growth journey for a long time, stay tuned as Martine and her guests share empowering stories. Now is the time to own your past and look toward your future with hope. Believe in your dreams, and all that you want to achieve is possible. Transformation Coach Martine helps you accept and love you for you. It's time to listen to your heart and tap into your unlimited potential. You have the answers you need inside. Sometimes you just need the right guide to help allow transformation to happen. Transformation with Martine starts now.
Welcome everyone to Transformation with Martine. This is where we conquer everything and compromise nothing. For those of you that are new, welcome. My show is every Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, and my show is about hope and resilience. And the guests that I invite on my show have powerful stories of overcoming resilience, and they are warriors. And that is what this is about. My hope for you is that when you leave the show today, you do have hope and you feel purposeful, and you have people. Each of my guests are awesome in what they do and are able to provide for you, services, different services, and whoever you resonate with, I really suggest you reach out with them, because everybody I have on my show, I know and believe in. And anyway, wouldn't have them on here if they weren't amazing with awesome stories. So anyway, without further ado, I want to welcome my guest, Jason Blount. He and I have been connected in a community of coaches, and so we're colleagues. So welcome, my friend.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Morning for me, afternoon for you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So what brought you into this wonderful world of transformation?
Being transformed really was, I didn't know what coaching was other than sports. And I kind of heard it in the peripheral once in a while, coaching coming up, and it was kind of synonymous with a trainer. Like a coach in the gym or something like that. And after my life went through some changes, I landed upon a course I took with Dean Graziosi and Tony Robbins. And out of that process, I just discovered that kind of my passion was really in coaching. Which harkens back to what I did before when I was a firefighter in terms of leadership and mentoring and training and even the realm of responding to people's emergencies and kind of holding space essentially for them to figure out what was wrong, either on a medical call or on a fire call or a larger call. I just realized I've got all these innate skills that I've developed all these years. I just wouldn't call them coaching until I went through this program, and the umbrella seemed to be coaching. And then I started taking some courses and have some people that I follow, like you, that I really admire their methodology, their skill, their approach to it, their ethics and their morals. And so that's where I've really landed on coaching and serving people in that capacity.
Yeah, it's a lot about values, isn't it?
Yeah.
For every step we make in our lives, whether it's business or personal, is like really checking in with ourselves and those values.
Yeah. And then having gone through my own life crisis events, you learn. There was a time where somebody went through something similar, and the best I could muster up was bummer. It was really paper thin, and it was well intended, but I couldn't reach what kind of feelings that person was going through. And then that happened to me. And out of that whole process, I have a whole new set of skills from that time, and an ability to connect with people or to feel for them, to connect to them and appreciate their pain or their difficulty or where they're stuck, to be able to see it where they can't see it and ask them some questions, as opposed to, because when we're told something, it's one thing, but when we can lead somebody to have their own solution, have their own aha and agreements within themselves, then there's some life changes that can occur because they've seen it for themselves. You've led them down that road. You've got in the middle of their situation, because now you can touch it much more than you could before. Speaking for myself. And now you can kind of lay out some breadcrumbs to kind of lead them along to see the same thing you're seeing. And then they go, oh,
Yeah.
so these are the changes I can make. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can walk down the path of how can we make those changes? How can you make those changes?
Yep. Yeah. It's interesting how you said that sometimes you can't quite understand what somebody's going through, or, a certain challenge or whatever it brings to my mind. And it's almost makes me ashamed how I know that when my brother went through cancer when he was 17, and I didn't fully understand it. I had just moved out of the house myself at that point, so I wasn't there for the whole thing. But I know my parents told me, and all the trips for chemo and what he went through. I wasn't really in it so much. And my sister was diagnosed with cancer as well at 21, a different type. And I was there more because I was 7 years older than her. I was there more for it because she was out of the house, and I cared for her quite a bit.
Mhm.
And I remember, like, just sometimes it's like, come on, let's go. We got to do this. This is for you, and sometimes it's like she just couldn't get that strength.
Mm.
And then getting it myself, cancer myself, different type as well. Really weird, right? All three of my parents' children got cancer, different types, and it was never in our family before. Weird. But I remember, like, thinking there were times where, like, golly, I've got my kids, I've got to get my butt in gear. I got to do this. And God, I have nothing. These treatments are just rough. And I remember thinking, God, I should have been a little more not so like, come on, Krista, even though it was for her, I still should have, but I didn't know.
Yeah.
And, and there were times, like, I think too, like when I had a miscarriage, I remember thinking, this is for my last child. He was a boy. And I remember thinking, okay, God, you're not going to let this happen to me. There's no way this is going to happen to me. And then it did. It just, the whole procedure thing happened. And I was like, boy, this is a club I don't want to be part of, but I have compassion for people. I always have, because of what I've went through, but even deeper for certain things that I've been through.
Sure.
Yeah. So would you walk us through your story? Would you mind sharing
No.
how the levels of, like, how you got where you are today?
Yeah. So I was a firefighter paramedic for 25 years. A little bit of volunteer, but mostly I was in a paid municipal department. We went to we did everything. We did emergency medical, we did fire, we went to structures. We also went out to do interface or wildland firefighting.
Yeah.
And did that for 25 years. I went up through the ranks, became a chief officer. I loved that department. It was so life-changing for me because my initial exposure was our training chief, who was a former Marine. And I had never been talked to in my life like this man talked to me. And he was from the school of you tear them down and build them back up. So it was a whole different, the culture was very, very, very up and down. There was a chain of command. There was a certain cadence. A lot of retired military were in the service, and it really grew me up. And I really appreciated that tough love. At the time, I did not like it at all. In fact, we'd leave our training sessions, my cadre, and we'd talk each other up. You're okay. You're making it through this. You're gonna be okay. Yeah. And so we had to keep talking to each other up because he was really good at keeping us on the edge. So we just stayed focused and stayed hungry to do better and better. As I went up through the ranks, through the course of a job, and anybody who's been in that kind of job, you see some pretty cool things. Births. You get to see some people brought back from traumatic events in terms of cardiac arrest or something like that. And you see a lot of horrible things too. Stabbings. We had a lot of stabbings in our area. I was on a unit that was very busy most of my part of my career. Saw a lot of traumatic accidents and car accidents, fatalities, suicides, the gambit. And I think I got really good at compartmentalizing. That's one thing that we get good at in that kind of a job as responders, is learning to compartmentalize things and not take it home and not burden people, and also not carry it forward. Just it happened, put it down, and let it go and move on to the next. I've seen I didn't have this happen while I was a father, but I had a medic that was just top notch. I really admired him. He went on to become a chief officer. He was really sharp. We went on a traumatic child call, and he was a brand new father. And I saw that man shut down.
Oh.
And it was the weirdest thing to see.
Mm-hmm.
Here's this guy that's sharp, really good, but just shut down. And I couldn't, I mean, I saw what was happening. I just couldn't identify with it. And luckily, I saw a lot of horrible things with kids, but never as a father.
Yeah.
I wasn't a parent when I saw those things. The flip side of that is when you learn to compartmentalize things that well, you can also learn to compartmentalize things at home. I compartmentalized my own selfish behavior. I struggled with pornography.
Mm-hmm.
I struggled with really just kind of telling the truth and being vulnerable. And that led to some erosions in trust in the marriage. And there was a time where I wanted to come and move from the department I was at, which I loved, and take a position at my hometown. I wanted to move away. I wanted to dial things back. I'd really gotten myself over involved because not only was I was a chief officer, I was in charge of emergency medical service, technical rescue, health and wellness at the time, and a couple other things. And I got in early. I left late. To my embarrassment, I remember being around a campfire on my days off with my laptop at 1 a.m, doing stuff that probably doesn't even matter today, but at the moment it did. And so I was really, I shifted things that should have been at the center of my circle of importance. I kind of pushed them out and made my job, my sole identity, my biggest part of my identity. Even you could argue even more than my faith and my family at times. I would say I was solid in my faith. I was solid in my family, but I had pushed them aside a lot, at least my relationship with my wife at the time. So I wanted to downshift. I wanted to go to a smaller department or same size department, just not as busy. I wanted to detach myself from being so busy, and went through the process of getting hired. I got accepted, and that same day I found out that my marriage was coming to an end. It was within 30 minutes. One phone call, yay. One phone call, nay.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized that all the resiliency I'd built up to handle other people's sufferings, to stand in their pain, to be at traumatic events, to watch people around me, such as my friend who was a father, and watching him go through something with a child, a fatality on a scene. I had a lot of resiliency in that realm. In fact, preceding this, the year before, I was with my mother when she took her last breath. And the year before that, I was with my dad when he took his last breath. I was at their bedside, taking care of him.
Yeah.
And so I built up all this resiliency. And it wasn't to me to say I was emotionally shut down. I felt I was really good at putting things in their place. But when this happened, it was that event where you really felt the axis of the earth kind of that shift moment.
Yeah.
And I got unraveled. I did the best I could, and I know there's no textbook way of working through those situations. When you realize that what you've invested your whole life on, your marriage and your family is in danger at a moment where you're considering a big move, which is the wrong time to make any kind of big move. Right. And I was scrambling. I remember the sensation was I felt like I was itching from the inside out. My nervous system was on fire. I couldn't eat. I had plenty of energy, trying to work it off at the gym. We went through counseling, and the discussion with my wife at that time was either we make the move, moving without. So I decided I'm going to go after that job. And you have to go through a psych evaluation and a few other steps and additional interviews. And I remember going through the psych evaluation with a psychologist, and it's like a 3 or 4 hour process of testing. And I met in his office the next day, and he goes, "You realize you're pretty effed up, don't you? Because you got to answer all this huge salvo of questions." And I said, "Yeah, but I got it."
Jason, I'm going to break for just a minute. We have to take a break and go to commercial. This is a good time to veer back into where the next steps you took.
Sure.
We'll take a quick break. So before we do, though, where can everybody find you?
You can get a hold of me. My email address is jasonb@gmail.com. I'm also have a website at jasonbcoach.com.
Okay. Thank you. And we'll be right back, everyone, to see what transpired after this psych evaluation that Jason went through. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to Transformation with Martine. This is where we conquer everything and compromise nothing. My guest today is Jason Blount, and we have been talking about his story of basically resilience for others, building resilience in other people as a fireman. But when tragedy hit him, that's a whole different ballgame. And where we led off, he was talking with a psychologist and having an evaluation and was not given the best news.
It was a very honest thing for him to say. And he was really looking out for the best interests of my potential employer and really protecting me. Yeah. My power of denial was pretty strong. And I said, I got this. Do you have resources down there? You'd say, yeah, I do. I didn't. I had a counselor I was given a reference to that I was going to see and work through the marital issues. But I said, I got this. And I had a few subsequent meetings with my new employers, several meetings, and they were trying to vet out if I was really a good fit. And so I took the job, I got accepted and moved the family. And all the while the marriage issues were continuing. We went through counseling, but they were just continuing on a trend, and they were just kind of holding steady. So as I took this new job, really to kind of bring a close to that part of the chapter, I did the best I could in trying to fit into a new culture at that department, a new way of doing things. I had a kind of a same level role that I had before, same title, battalion chief. The culture was different in terms of how they communicated, and I discovered that there were some things I was being told to do, but it wasn't clear, and there was some dysfunction, which later kind of found itself out. Oh, by the way, when I was leaving my old department, there were some issues going on there too that was causing stress, and there were some big upheavals in command with different people that were moving on. There were some accusations being made. I really could have done a better job looking back on it, stepping up for some of my friends who were being falsely accused of things. But there was a few people that were bad actors that were really good at playing people off of each other, and I got sucked into that, and I didn't react to that well either. So when I left that department, I still reflect back on that time. I wish I could have done a better job for them when I left, because I didn't leave like I ever wanted to leave a job that I loved and respected and the people that I admired. And then when I got into this new situation, hoping for some reprieve, hoping for some new life, gonna work on the marriage, gonna reestablish my career and kind of slow things down, I discovered some dysfunctions there. And 9 months into the job, some different things happened, some that I take account on for misunderstandings, for poor performance. I was just over my head dealing with what was going on in my personal life to really be present in my job like I should have been. So I take responsibility for that. The environment wasn't helping where there were some dysfunctions, because 2 weeks after I got fired from that job, the chief of the department got let go. And then in subsequent year and a half, 2 other command officers moved on, which is a big statement, I think, to the health of the organization. So, I was without my job and had a long walk after I left, and called my wife and said I needed to talk to her, and told her what had happened. I got let go, and there it was without my career job. This was my dream job to finish on, and I had no thought of what else I could do. I really had learned everything in the fire service. I didn't learn construction. I didn't learn another trade. And it was trying to figure things out, what other jobs I could take. So I took part-time jobs here and there, or even asked another chief of another fire department, a volunteer fire department, to keep my credentials up so I could participate and apply for other jobs and down the road, because there was no other jobs available. And I realized, we had talked about this earlier, you realize who your real friends are. Because he said, I really don't want to get associated with you right now because of your firing from this department. And he was really looking out for himself. And that really showed who he was. So I took odd jobs, and to fast forward a little bit, I even went overseas over to some friends that were overseas and looked at some jobs over there with my wife.
Mm-hmm.
And then on Father's Day of that year, I got a notice for a divorce. So I went through that process. Depression got even heavier because I couldn't find a job, and it just spun downhill. How I was regulating myself, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat. I ended up finding a job as a freight broker during the day, which I'm still doing today. And getting off the ground on that was it's all sales. So it was very new to me.
Yeah.
I took a job at night as a janitor in a mill where you're just
Mm-hmm.
cleaning up the bathrooms and sweeping floors. And I did that so I could participate in my kids' sports in the evening. So I'd
Mm-hmm.
get up, work from 5 to 2 or 3 in the afternoon, have the afternoon to do things with my kids, or the evening. And then I would go to my night job and did that for about 3 years. So I was on about 2 to 4 hours sleep a night for that period of time just to work through it. And I started listening, just listen to music, whatever it was, to pass the time doing that janitor job. And then I started listening to stuff more along the lines of self-education.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started kind of realizing there are people I felt like I was on my own little island, and you do in those moments. And I realized I'm not really alone. I keep telling myself alone, but I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
So I needed to shift my mindset and how to think on things better. I had a chance to talk to another firefighter who's a coach now the other day, and she said
Mm-hmm.
something to me that reminded me that these transitions happen for a reason. And the more I sit in that place of being a victim of the circumstances, the more I'm going to view myself and think of myself. And I don't know if our time is going to really lend itself to talk about that, but I will say that I really suffered myself by keeping myself in that place of victimhood.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reminded, even just today, that it leaks out around the corners. When I was talking to her, I felt my shoulders shrug in, felt my head go low, and she called me on it. And I'm so grateful she did, because I had a fantastic career. I know I got to do, so I could tell you things I did. It's just not bragging. It's things I got to do. I worked with incredible people and had incredible experiences. And now as a coach, I can call upon those things when I go to help others. But it's a process of just reminding myself. And so those times being a janitor, I redeemed the time by listening to podcasts and audiobooks that really, there are concepts that were foreign to me. As I went through counseling, my counselor was describing to me what a healthy mindset looks like, a healthy perspective, a healthy self-image looks like. And I said at one point, I hear what you're saying. I'm not trying to argue with you. I can't see it. It's like you're telling me what's inside this room, what's on the walls, where the door is, but the paintings, I can't see any of it. So I had to saturate myself with audiobooks and podcasts with concepts just to get it into my head, because I had been so polluted in what I learned. Polluted may not be the right word. The way I was taught and grew up led me to certain beliefs about myself and about my surroundings and how to operate in life. And then in the course of losing things, how I viewed myself, I had to relearn how to look at myself, relearn how to look at what's going on in the relationship to make it fall apart. At first, it was all her, and there were some things that were clearly wrong. Then I look back to and things that preceded those times, and I realized I made contributions that I have to own up and take responsibility for these things. Mm-hmm. So I used that time to really saturate myself with some learning on about myself and how to relate and how to work through this time. Because I was now a janitor, I was also giving plasma. I borrowed a friend's trailer to help people do dump runs. So I was just doing whatever I could to earn money. Yep. And it was month to month trying to keep up with child support, rent, and everything else, because I was just barely getting by that's why I did it for 4 years, 4 years like that. And when you're doing that, it doesn't leave a lot of room for creativity. I learned that when you're hunkered down, you're just trying to survive. It doesn't really leave any room for creativity. It doesn't leave any energy to go out and look for bigger, better jobs. I was just burnt out. And so by the end of that 3 or 4 years, I saw a doctor because my hormones were so off. I went on hormone replacement therapy. I had ballooned up quite a bit because I was eating junk food to I was so tired. I was just that the whole cycle of eating just because you're tired, not so
Right.
much emotional eating, but just the hormones were driving these crazy cravings just to make me feel better. So that 4 years, I really did more damage than repairing myself, but I learned a lot. And that's where I really started to kind of apply things a lot better to building myself back up, not only just in my mind, but now physically taking some bigger risks in life to better my financial situation, to start thinking better of myself and stepping forward, at least and even in my day job as a broker, stepping up and working harder at that as opposed to just getting used to just getting by.
Yeah.
Kind of lost track of what I was saying with that, but
we're going to take a break in a moment. Do you think running, like when you switch jobs, was that your way of kind of running away from the situation, trying to make it better? Just thinking, oh, a new place, new start, everything will be better.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Initially it was my thought of, I really wanted to just move to a quieter place. I really wanted to move home and slow things down, be more involved with family. And then it became, as things were changing at work and more pressure was on me personally, it just seemed like, hey, this is a good place to go for a fresh start. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's pretty common, and it's also pretty common, or we know this as coaches and what we do, that sometimes it's easier to fall into that victim mode. I mean, we want other people to hear us. We want them to hear what we've been through. And we want that, to be understood, to be like accepted. We want someone to say that, hey, that is hard. But then we also, as you doing all these, podcasts and learning and everything, you start to realize like, hey, maybe I can use this for something.
Yeah, absolutely. It little by little, the pieces started coming together. And that's why I really want to, thanks for bringing me back to that, is all the pieces were coming together. The learnings, the certainty about who I was, the reminder that I'm still of value, because there was a great time of really doubting that. There was a loss of faith and a regaining of it again, a more sincere relational faith as opposed to just genie in a bottle kind of faith. And really putting those pieces together, the learnings of that room that was initially dark and black and I couldn't see everything. I was starting to see everything vividly and having certainty of going, okay, this is a healthy way of thinking about myself. This is taking responsibility and accountability for my life. This is realizing where there were things that were happening that were completely out of my control and aren't reflective on me. This is a reflective on those people. But these are the situations I can also take responsibility, how I responded and reacted to it. And then you start standing up a little more prouder, because now you're no longer under that whip of being a victim, being a slave to those thoughts and those feelings. Now, no, I can see the room more clearly. I have certainty about who I am and what happened. And I can divide that line between what happened to me without my control or my consent, and those things I can take responsibility for. I don't have to muddy the water and take everything and blame myself for everything.
Right. Absolutely. I'd like to talk a little bit about evidence when we get back.
Okay.
We're going to take a quick break, everyone. Thank you. And Jason, again, where can everybody find you?
You can find me at my webpage at jasonbcoach.com. And I may have given you my personal email before. It's jasonbcoach@gmail.com. Either one, it's good with me. Reach out to me anytime.
Yes. All right. We'll be right back. Thank you, everyone. Welcome back, everyone, to Transformation with Martine, where we conquer everything and compromise nothing. My guest today is Jason Blount, and we've been talking his experience as a firefighter, and then when his world just fell apart, and realized that a lot of his resilience was built in others, not in himself. And we left off, and when we left off, I mentioned evidence. And a lot of us in our lives, when we go through a lot of different traumatic events, we can look back later, especially when we're in another situation, because, life happens. There's always something that we have to conquer, in my opinion. Life is never really easy, but it's also really good. If we go back and look through the things that we went through, and we can get the lessons out of there, we got to get those blessings out of the lessons. And as I used to say, and it's on my website, we we get these sandpaper wrap gifts sometimes that they're not fun to open, and they're not a joy at all. But once we get through them and we realize that, oh gosh, another situation will come up, it's like, if I haven't gone through this, I would not really know so much what I'm doing now. So if we take a look at all the things that we've been through and look at those blessings, it's easier to reflect on the next thing that happened. So Jason, you went through all these things and you started really working on yourself. What kind of evidence did you come up with? And I'd like you to brag a bit about your career. I think all of us should do that, because to me, it's not bragging. It's just like you're just sharing experiences that other people can look and say, "Ooh, that's awesome. Maybe I can achieve that."
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you brought us this point or reminded me of this, because there are some things you have to, when your mind is spinning on something and it's a negative thought, you got the inner critic just on your shoulder chatting at you and doing whatever they're doing to distract you or speak negative thoughts to you. There comes a point where you have to tell that voice to shut up. And it might be just simply to say to yourself, is that the truth? And it's in those moments, that's one of the tools I learned, was when that chatter was starting up on a given situation. Wait a minute, is that the truth? Yeah. No, I didn't give up here. Somebody else gave up. And I'd ask, wait a minute, how did I deal with this before with somebody else? So I learned several frameworks in the fire department for how to manage incidents and how to roll up to a fire scene. And you see so much so quickly, you have to make snap decisions based on the information you're given and suppositions of what could be going on when you see those cues. So you get better at seeing something for what it is, making a call, making adjustments on the fly. And when you're stuck in that mindset of negativity and you ask yourself, wait a minute, what's the truth? Well, this is the truth. And then you start formulating a plan of how you're going to deal with it, or how you're going to not deal with it. You make a pause and allow some time between the event that upsets you before you have a response. Yeah. So you learn timing, and I learned all that from the fire service. So on the EMS side, I really loved being there in the midst of people's chaos, because I felt very confident and certain in myself, my abilities to be the voice of reason, to be the voice of calm, to make the right decisions. And not because I'm so great. I felt confident in my own skills, but I had people around me too that I trusted, and I knew how to direct them. I knew how to get them to speak honestly with me if I'm missing something. And so I got really good. I felt really good about that. And I can think about cardiac arrests. I can think about delivering babies on scene, which was the best. It's not like the TV shows and the movies. Sometimes you get there just towards the end of the event, and sometimes you get there right in the middle of things happening. But that was some of the best times. That's some of the most rewarding times, some of the most emotionally gratifying times. And there's times where I'm being there with somebody crying and sobbing because they've lost their child in a very traumatic fashion, and to be able to hold space for them in that moment, and not lie to them and tell them everything's going to be okay, and not just be a distance, not knowing what to say is and learning how to read them and seeing what they need, and at least asking, what can I do for you? What can I help you? As opposed to being standoffish and let them suffer alone, or try and push something on to them because it makes you feel better. I got to manage large fires. I got to be there at car accidents, even when between my house and my work, where I showed up by myself before anybody else did. And there's literally the one I'm thinking of, cars scattered on the street, and people, different configurations in and out of cars. And being able to manage that on the radio, a lot of people yelling, crying. There's very chaotic scenes you learn how to manage, you learn how to contain them. Man, I could think of all those things that happen. I could think about the achievements, being able to pull somebody out of a burning building for the first time, and the gratification. That's kind of one of every firefighter's dream, is to be able to pull somebody out of the fire. And to pull somebody out, that was incredible. I think the medical calls really stand out more because they were more frequent. I love the physical challenge of going through the fire. For me, it was scary. It was awing. It was to see what fire does inside of a structure, to be able to go inside and watch it and behave, and then put it out. It's not, there's a whole science to it, and to be appreciated and to understand the art of it too, how you attack a fire. To be able to promote up and be a chief officer is something. To take a program like our emergency medical services and really to give it what I thought at the time was a step up, to give it more value to the guys and the women that were serving, so they could do a better job, and they could get them. I worked on getting them more in touch with what you do on the scene. Here was the outcome, and here's where you did really, really a good job, and here's some areas where we can shave off a few seconds here on these type of calls, which are going to better the patient's outcome. I really tried to lengthen that gap of information so people would get a better picture of what was really working, what wasn't. And there was other programs I really felt like I wanted to champion for the people I worked with to make it better. And in that process, boy, you scrape your knees, you bump your elbows, because you just, there's some things you do kind of clumsy. There's some things you do haphazardly, innocently. But I really enjoyed the process of trying to bring programs up. I got to speak on a national stage at a large convention for firefighters a couple different times. Scary as all get out for me, because I did not like public speaking at the time. And it still brings up the adrenaline. Even when I taught in the fire department, we wore kind of a baby blue uniform shirt, and it became dark blue by the time I would get done teaching because I sweated so much. And my officer said, I know it's our standard uniform, but I think when you teach, you should just wear a t-shirt, because I would just get nervous and sweat. But working on that, overcoming that, and I got to speak on a national stage. And it's those times, kind of going back to the lessons learned, it's those times where I was beating myself and that inner critic was really having its way with me to say, wait, what's the truth here? What's really the truth?
That's the thing to ask. What is the truth?
Yeah, you did do these things. And then I carried that framework on how to manage incidents, because my life had become an incident. And the complexity was there, and it was a long-standing incident. It wasn't just a couple hours or a day. It wasn't like a wildland fire. It was going into a couple weeks or a month. This was going on years. And so how am I going to manage my life now? And so the framework of how I managed incidents and took care of people, I focused out on myself and how am I going to manage my life? How am I going to prioritize things and not get spun up around all the minutia around it, the details? And that's where I continue to ask myself, what's really the issue? Is this the truth? Do you need to answer this? Do you need to respond to this right now? Or do you need to take care of this first? In a moment where I was just one thing literally after another was happening, it helped me to put things in their proper perspective. And I learned that all from the fire service. And some of it was innate. I just didn't know I was doing it. I became more conscious of it when I started dealing with my inner critic, because the inner critic was really toxifying how the superego is what's in part of our psyche, our mind, that tells us right and wrong. And it gets toxified in these events where right and wrong gets kind of skewed. And I was blaming myself for everything, taking upon myself the responsibility for things that weren't mine. And once I could call that into accountability and say, what's the truth? Then I don't have to deal with everything I'm trying to take responsibility for. And I can say, this is my responsibility. I'm going to take care of this now, and this can wait. I don't have to be so emotionally charged. That allowed me to calm down, even though on the outside, I tend to be pretty mellow fellow, pretty baseline. Inside, it can be another story. So it allowed me to calm down. That's when I started to sleep at night. That's when I started to not beat myself up. When I'm at the gym and I'm doing a lift, and there's really like a bench press or something really simple like that, those that are out there that do any kind of lifting, and I just, come on, fatty, just one more. And I just realized I got that. Well, see, that's not what I want to say to myself. That part of me just kind of goes, it says that, and it's kind of a joking thing, but it's not. So as silly as it may sound, it's not silly. It's a good thing. I have a friend of mine years ago that called me Zeus.
Oh, that's better.
Yeah. And so when I get done with the lift, I'll give myself a pat on the back. Good job, Zeus.
Yes.
But the little negative speak becomes not so much tongue in cheek. It becomes that subconscious languaging we tell ourselves. And we downgrade ourselves. We say things like, I really don't want to hurt your feelings, but here's what I'm thinking, as opposed to saying what you're thinking.
Right.
And that framework, that permission to say, to really recognize who I am and what I've done and all my accomplishments, they really did happen. And I'm the one that did those things.
Yeah.
And so now as I'm going through this, it was to constantly remind myself the truth, and remind myself how I want to show up. Now that I know what the truth is, now I can say, this is how I really want to show up.
Yeah.
When I do a lift, I'm not going to call myself, good job, fatty.
Yeah.
Say, good job, Zeus. Good job, Jason. Well done. Really work through that, because that's how I want to speak to others. So, because the other part of it is, you learn that when you start speaking that way to yourself, it does start to show up around how you speak to others. I've seen it from others. I've been called on it a couple of times where I think I'm being silly or sarcastic, and I realize, no, that inner speak is starting to be part of my normal speak, and I have to, but it wasn't before. So again, going back to my accomplishments, I did these things. I delivered babies.
Yeah.
I did things. I went into places that not a lot of people want to go into, and I saw some things that really nobody else wants to see. And I take great pride in that. And I remember that, and okay, that's who I am. That's who I am going through this.
Yeah, like when you're talking to yourself like that, or that just like a heart lurch for me, like because I spent so many years in the self-abuse room, and it's taken me a long time to come out. And it was actually one of our colleagues, which I don't have to say her name, you'll know exactly who I'm talking to. She had me do a mirror exercise where, instead of looking in the mirror and talking good to yourself, she had me look myself in my eyes and just was nasty. Like, you say all these things to her. Go ahead, do it.
Well, that's a good one.
Man, that is just like, it still gives me chills when I think about that now, because I was so mean to myself.
Yeah.
On the outside, like you were talking about, on the outside, very warm, kind person. I am. I'm very nice to other people. Myself, not so much.
Yeah.
And it's taken years to like me. So like when you say that, that's just like breaks my heart, because nobody should talk to themselves like that. I think it's amazing. And working, you've got children just like I do, and our producer here, he's got one on the way. It's like,
oh, congrats.
We got to build. We have to build our children up, and in doing that, we have to build ourselves up first.
Yeah.
So Jason, who do you love to work with? And what is your best advice to someone who has been where you are? Where you were, not are. Sorry.
I love to work with caring people that want to get to that next level in life, whatever it is. And if it's the people that are going through a divorce or a loss, especially my brothers and sisters in the fire service, I got you. I get that. Obviously. Yeah. My feelings around that are very deep. I have a lot of respect for people going through that.
Yes.
What was the second part of the question?
Yeah, the people that you work with, but like who, like someone comes to see you and they, like how would you help them? What is your best advice to someone just getting started?
It is having a great conversation with somebody you can gain trust in. And allowing yourself the freedom and the permission to be honest and authentic about things. You have to find somebody that's going to be willing to literally roll up their sleeves and get in the mud with you. I had the experience of ripping the Band-Aid off and telling somebody when things were fresh, and the next day I spoke and says, I'm good. I don't need to hear anymore. And that's the last I heard of them. That sucked. So find somebody that you can really trust that's going to be there for you, that's not going to fix you necessarily. Because they're trying to, sometimes when we do that, we're trying to make it comfortable for ourselves. So have somebody that can hold some space, be quiet and listen, and find out what you need. The second thing is to realize what you're going through. You're not alone. You may tell yourself that your situation is so unique that nobody could possibly identify. I respect that where that comes from, but I'll tell you lovingly, you're lying to yourself. You're telling yourself that to make your situation so great that nobody will touch it, and you're not allowing people the opportunity to. We've all gone through the worst thing we can imagine. People just have. And your situation may be unique to you with the names and the locations and the dealings, but people go through suffering and traumas all the time.
Yeah.
So don't take yourself off that island, grow that island out. So there's room for other people on it. I put myself on an island and found it wasn't true. The other thing is how you speak to yourself. Get in touch with, read, go listen to podcasts, audiobooks that are edifying, that are educational, that build you up, that give you tools on how to deal with what you're going through. Because what you've gone through is traumatic, and it's going to taint how you look at every situation going forward.
Yeah.
And the more you can bring the unconsciousness of that moment, of those things, into the conscious, where you can be aware of it, the more you work on doing that, then you'll understand what you're dealing with. So you can learn how to talk to yourself better. And even understanding when people say, well, I can't change. Well, is that a fact, or is that a decision?
Yeah.
Often we say, I can't do something to excuse it to circumstances, where the reality is, I won't. I can't quit smoking. You can't quit smoking, or you won't. You can't put down that cheeseburger, Jason, or you won't put down that cheeseburger, Jason.
Right.
It's a decision. And so learning where we tell ourselves one thing when the truth is we're just afraid to go through the difficulty of going through that to get to the other side. To have somebody that can walk with you to not necessarily tell you what to do. There may be time for that, but to help you work through discovering what you want and what's in the way of getting there, and how you're going to work through it. Again, it goes back to me being on the scene with the fire, getting there and seeing what the problem is, what do we want, then discovering the steps how to get there. In my own fire, that's what somebody did for me and what I started learning to do for myself. And there's all kinds of tools you can use to stop the chatter, both internally and externally. There's a way of learning how to take care of yourself physically, which is immense, because when your body feels good, your mind will feel better. Your process, you'll feel better about yourself. You'll feel better 100%. About your outlook on life. You'll just feel more capable and strong, or athletic and nimble, depending upon your build. But it is really giving yourself permission to be selfish for your own sake. And it's a good thing. It's a good thing to stop martyring yourself. One thing that I learned. You can take yourself off the cross and start taking care of yourself, and take yourself physically, taking care of your mind and your emotions by reading, seeing where other people have been and what they've done to get through a situation similar, and the lessons learned. Start to understand yourself and how you process things. And get with somebody, again, that you trust, that's going to give space and is going to help you on the healing. Not somebody's going to tell you yes all the time, or you're right, or you got wrong, or screwed, and you deserve everything. You need somebody that's going to be honest with you, and even tell you things you don't maybe want to hear, but you need to hear, in all honesty and all love. I think some of my best friends, when I went to them and said, you're not going to believe what happened. This happened, and this person did me wrong, and now this is the outcome. And you lean across the table and they go, so what are you going to do? Well, that's not what I wanted. I wanted you to tell me I was right.
Exactly.
But that doesn't do us any good, right?
Nope.
It does. It's satiating for the moment, because we feel, hey, I got somebody on my side.
Exactly.
Well, let's think about what we really want. We want to get better. It doesn't do us any good to be right if we're wrong, or if it's going to not help us out. We could be right as we want to be. There's been plenty of times I've discovered I was right, but by claiming being right, it got in the way of a relationship. It got in the way of forgiveness and grace and putting something aside and moving on. Because there's plenty of times I was right. There's plenty of times turns out I was wrong about something when I swore at the time I was right.
Right.
So having somebody that can hold space and be honest and authentic with us, it's not going to be a yes person, not a yes man, not a yes woman. It's going to listen.
Yeah.
And that may mean letting go of some relationships or not sharing some of these things with some relationships and sharing them with other people.
Yep.
And if you don't have that circle, that's where people like myself come in, and you do too, where we can coach people and walk them through it, or a counselor or a therapist or something.
Yes. I think coaching is the absolute best thing. And just like you, when I first heard of coaching, all I could think about was football or something like that, or sports, at high school or whatever, is that's all I thought of. And now I think it's the best thing there is, and somebody who is going to talk to you real, not just tell you what you want to hear or anything. That does you no good.
Well, and here's the other thing with coaching, and maybe you can agree to this or counter this, whatever, but there's coaches I hold in high esteem.
Yep.
And I put them on a pedestal. And then when they let me in on the reality, they go, I'm just like you. I've got kids in the other room that I gotta deal with because they've been horrible to each other, and one doesn't want to go to school. And I've got this happening in my life. My life's not messed up, but I have real things going on. So I've got a coach for this. I've got a relationship coach.
Yep.
I've got a financial advisor.
Yep.
We all need, the human experience is a communal experience. We will die in solitude when we're in solitude. When we're in emotional solitude, it's crippling. And some of us grow up in that, we get used to that. And so we need community. We need to have people and coaches. Doctors have doctors.
Yep.
Coaches have coaches. Psychologists have psychologists, and therapists have therapists.
They do.
They do. And some of the really, really good coaches have coaches because they know that we all have our blind spots in life. And
all coaches need a coach.
Yeah. We all have our blind spots in life. And when we're able to say that of ourselves, not so much woe is me or like I said, fatty, we're not degrading ourselves, or we're just being honest that I've got blind spots. I realize I've got blind spots after talking to this fellow coach who was a firefighter. And it's like, wow, I didn't know I was projecting that, but she called me on it. So I got some work to do.
Right. And we all do. We all do. We all have things that we need to work on. And Jason, man, we can keep talking for hours, but another show is coming up. But where can everybody find you again? One more time.
And thank you so much. You can get a hold of me at jasonbcoach@gmail.com is my email, or jasonbcoach.com is my webpage. Be happy to answer any questions, entertain a conversation on Zoom or phone call or email, whatever would help.
Wonderful. And, he's the real deal, my friends. He's a wonderful, caring, kind human, and he will do great work for you. Please reach out to him, and feel free to reach out to me as well. And thank you for tuning in, everyone. And we'll see you next Friday.
Thank you for tuning in to Transformation with Martine, real, raw, and vulnerable conversations. Listen or watch live every Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern on transformationtalkradio.com, as Martine and her guests have deep, meaningful conversations, sharing empowering stories. Step into your passions and lead with your heart. If you are ready to accept and love you for you, visit martineemmons.com and start allowing transformation to happen today.